What we're going to talk about today is asking the right Q, evaluating student learning experiences and empowering course reform through course evaluation, which didn't seem as wordy when we wrote it. And it's a joke because we use Q methodology. We're not really that funny, as you can tell. My co-author, Danielle Brewer-Duluth, did a lot of work on that, and she's at Western right now and on mat leave. And we'd like to thank Merit for helping us fund some of this. So our research question was really how the changes induced by the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic influenced students' perception of their A&P course experience. Okay, of course, that that was not what we decided, that was inflicted upon us. We didn't actually send that virus out in the world to find out how it affected A&P courses. But never let a good pandemic get in the way of research. And so we managed to actually start our study just before it occurred. And then finish it after it was well underway. So this is a huge course. This is a 850 student course, and it has Bachelor of Health Sciences and nursing students and engineers and iBiomeds, we call them, midwifery students. It's pretty straightforward. It's a 2-hour lecture and a 2-hour tutorial or lab every week. And it uses full use of the anatomy lab, cadaveric specimens, the whole thing. It's a bit of a flagship course for these programs, very well evaluated. It's pretty simple to evaluate. We sort of use multiple choice questions and OSPs, otherwise known as bell ringers. And we don't have very much subjective marking, much to the chagrin of the students. It's really just how much anatomy you know. So there were huge changes that occurred, obviously, and the lectures moved online starting in early March. And the laboratory exercises had to be completely canceled since we couldn't bring all the students together. And the evaluations, well, we didn't have any really great tools at the very end. And because it was mostly objective and not subjective, it was really difficult to move them online because we didn't have good testing protocols. So we made a bell ringer exam. This was made from the Bassett collection. The Bassett collection is actually a beautiful set of stereoscopic images made for the Viewmaster company in the 1960s. If you want to see something that's unbelievably good, I can direct you to the Bassett collection. We made an app about it and all sorts of stuff. And we made an assignment for the final, which put people in groups, and we asked them to make multiple choice questions and evaluate them and give the rationale of why it was good. It all seemed like a great idea. It was pretty close to a complete disaster. The students went completely bonkers setting the questions, and then it was impossible to evaluate how they went. And so we ended up giving everyone 80%, which didn't make everyone happy. And we were definitely told how unhappy they were about how that played out. There was very little choice, to tell you the truth, very little we could do. So we really wanted to evaluate this. And what our solution was for evaluation, as it often is to use something called Q methodology. And Q methodology is something that I've personally been using since about 2009, I think. And it's a rank ordering system used to identify groups of common opinion and preference. I don't know, has anybody here done any Q methodology? Dr. Barry, you don't count. Anyone else done Q method? If anyone has, I'm going to say no, because 90% of the time, nobody has. So how does it actually work? Well, normally in a course, you get this. This would be some sort of Likert-based scale. And students, if you're often like some of my students, will just go like this. Oh yeah, here. You just circle all these at once, or they just sort of scatter something down. And they can be very difficult to kind of, evaluate. I mean, communicates well is what does that really mean? It's pretty hard to know. And so in the end, you get something like that, you average over the class, and then you find out, oh, I got 6.5 out of 7. What does that really tell you about the course or about yourself? Not a whole lot. And putting a standard deviation is just lipstick on a pig. It doesn't really help you a whole lot, because what do those things mean very much? And it didn't give you a lot of direction. Well, Q method is substantially different. What you do in Q method is you collect all the statements that you have from previous studies. You can go from past feedback in the course, literature review, so previous studies. You can even talk to current students and TAs and just say, what are the statements that really speak to you about this course? And you take all of them, and in our case, we got hundreds of them, and then you refine them. And what refining the statements means is you take every one of those statements and you sit down with a bunch of people who are familiar with the course, and you say, oh, that statement is much like this statement, and this is not getting at anything new. You get rid of statements that aren't I statements because you want them to be about that person. And you also get rid of statements that are just blah. You want statements that people can take a stand about. And so you take them all, you sit down, and you put them all together. And in this case, we came up with 37 exclusive statements really about what was happening in that course. And those all came from directly from the participants in the course. So it's not some vague qualitative thing at the end. This is exactly what the students thought. But what do you do with the statements? That's the critical thing. You make people sort them. And this is where it's special. So you're going to take each statement and you're going to see if they agree or strongly disagree. And this is going to be very similar to Likert, except that you only have so many things they can agree with and so many things they can disagree with. And it's all relative to how you feel. And the other thing is that the thing that they feel the most excited about, we ask them to really just write down something qualitative. If you really disagree with this statement, tell me why, because we really need to know about those really strong things. And so here's what it looks like. One of the strong statements was the students felt I needed way more time for multiple choice exams. You might not think that's significant, but maybe we were crazy and stressing the heck out of them. And so the student would take that statement, they would put it in there and say, yeah, I don't agree with that. And then they would take another statement like the critical lectures, were they great? Yes, this person thought those great lectures were great. They do that 37 times in a row. And what happens is now you force a distribution of qualitative feeling. And it's amazing because all of those things beforehand were vague. Like, how bad was the multiple choice exam? Well, you don't actually know until you force it against something else, right? So that's what we did. And then what we do is we do a factor analysis, because what happens is groups of people have very similar feelings about this. So we group them all in common opinion and value and preference. And it's beautiful because it works out in factor analysis. And we do centroid factor extraction with Varimax rotation. I only put that there in hopes no one will ask me any questions about centroid factors or Varimax. Okay, so what happens in this course is we did a full online Q sort before the pandemic hit, and then after the final exam. So the midterm, it's a 3-unit course and then another 3-unit course together. And we had before and after. It was almost a perfect thing. I felt terrible about the virus. I was pretty happy about the study. So we ended up with 125 people before and after. And here's what happened, or before, sorry. And beforehand, what happened, BC, 2019 BC, another very poor joke. And you'll see what happened is it usually breaks down to 3 or at most 4 groups. And then the groups get too small to look at. And in that first group, and the second group, and the third group, and what happened was the first group, as we normally see, are very positive about the course. They love handling the specimens, the faculty walk on water, the TAs are the best thing ever. And then some that are neutral, and then there's a negative group, usually around examination things. And we try to change that group instead. But what happened afterwards was we had a little bit fewer people. By the way, if you're doing Q method, it's not actually that sensitive to the number of people that you put into it. 64 is a huge group by Q standards. After COVID, those groups, we still had 3 groups of about, but the largest group now became extremely negative. Everything we were doing was really pretty bad. Fewer neutral, and it was a modest positive group that we focused on. So just in summary, right, we just went from having a course people liked to a course that people hated, all in one semester. We blame COVID, but was that really fair? I mean, what did it have? I mean, why were they angry about it? What were the issues that were up there? And what happened? So what we actually did was combine the data, and we did that to try to get a little bit more variety in the answers. We could do it separately. Doesn't really matter. And so there it is, sort of blown apart. And if we look at the positive feelings were really very solidly around. I feel the anatomy lab is interesting and excellent for understanding the material. Cadaver specimens are critical to my learning. You can kind of see where the problems might be in the second semester, because the whole program is sending cadaveric specimens home with students probably wasn't going to fly very well. And they also felt that the tutorials are useless. So they strongly disagreed with that. They thought tutorials were fantastic, and it was really hard to have tutorials. And the other thing is that They were strongly against the feeling that TAs were not always prepared. They felt the TAs were actually super prepared. That was the positive group. Now, the negative group was angry because of the exams. They were angry because the material they didn't think we tested them on the stuff that they wanted to see, pretty standard stuff. And they also felt that the course wasn't as run as cleanly and coherently as they wanted. And both of those statements were really about course structure. But what I want to point out here is there's nothing here that's inherently COVID, right? You can blame COVID if you want, but the truth is that a lot of these statements are really about things that students really dislike, which is disorganization and a lack of access to materials. The other great thing about Q method is that it's really excellent because it gives you consensus statements. These are things that everybody agrees about. And everybody wanted more review sessions. They wanted more dissection review sessions, more dissection. They wanted to learn more from their examinations. And that's really the two last statements are more just about testing issues. And if you look at some of the quotes, they keep emphasizing more review sessions. And this is the one I love. The exam had many questions I was unsure about. Okay, we think that's a bit of a win for us, but sorry, next time we'll give you all the questions you expect. And then they also felt that it was time issues. But there's nothing there ostensibly about COVID, right? It's just difficulties with examinations. So what was our conclusion? Well, it was amazing because it gave us extremely granular data about where we should be having some effect, right? It wasn't a few statements and we're not sure why they're important and where we should go. It's very clearly prioritized. And the main issues that caused the changes in attitude had everything to do with online. Shifting to online really quickly was what caused the vast majority of the problems. And so it did have to do with the COVID shift, but it could have been mitigated. And that's what we're trying to do in 2021. So we made massive changes based really on this Q method because we know precisely really what we have to change to make those students feel better about it. By the way, if you want 7 out of 7 on your likers, don't do Q method because it always finds something that's wrong, right? No matter what happens, there's going to be bad stuff in there because something's got to be the worst and something's got to be the best. But it does allow the revolution in your course to continue because it always gives you useful feedback and it's ranked. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming along. I'd like to thank my co-author, that's Isla, my dog. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of you guys in 3D sometime. And I'd also like to thank Merit because they helped fund the project.